Did the Cleveland Browns just make their biggest decision of the season without actually announcing it? Because if you've been paying close attention, something feels off. Not loud, not dramatic, but subtle. Quiet moves, small comments, and just enough hints to make you wonder if the entire quarterback situation has already been decided behind the scenes. It all started when head coach Todd Monken spoke out, and unlike most coaches who play it safe, he didn't hold back. He made it clear that Shedeur Sanders has been putting in serious work, showing up, grinding, and doing everything you'd expect from someone trying to take over franchise. And then, almost casually, he pointed out that Dillon Gabriel hasn't been around the facility the same way. That alone raised eyebrows. But here, where it gets even more interesting, this isn't just one coach talking. Reports suggest that people at the very top, including Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam, have been quietly praising Shedeur's work ethic and leadership. Not in a flashy, headline-grabbing way, but enough to build a pattern. And when patterns start forming in the NFL, they usually mean something. Meanwhile, the idea of a quarterback battle is still being pushed publicly. Deshaun Watson is still in the picture, still tied to a massive contract, but insiders are hinting that reps might not be as evenly split as people think. So now the question isn't just who can win the job. It's whether the decision has already been made, and the rest of us are just catching up. Because if all these signs are pointing in one direction, then what we're watching right now might not be a competition at all. Everything changed with one comment, and most people didn't even catch how serious it was. When Browns head coach Todd Monken stepped up and spoke about Shedeur Sanders, it didn't sound like your typical off-season coach talk. There was no vague praise, no safe answers. Instead, it came off direct, almost intentional. He pointed out that Shedeur has been in the building consistently, putting in extra work, showing up when it matters most. And in the NFL, coaches don't highlight that kind of detail unless they want people to notice. But what really turned heads wasn't just the praise, it was what came right after. Almost quietly, Monken made it known that Dillon Gabriel hasn't been doing the same. He didn't go out of his way to criticize him, but the contrast was impossible to ignore. One quarterback grinding behind the scenes, the other reportedly not as present. And in a league where effort and visibility matter just as much as talent, that kind of comparison speaks volumes. Now here, where it gets even more interesting. Monken also talked about leadership, and the way he described it felt very specific. He mentioned that leadership isn't something you can teach. You either have it or you don't. And based on what he's seeing so far, it's being said that Shedeur is naturally stepping into that role. Not forcing it, not trying to prove anything, but earning it through how he carries himself day in and day out. That's a big deal. Because when a head coach starts talking about leadership this early, especially in connection to one player, it usually means they're already envisioning something bigger. Not just a contributor, but someone who could potentially take control of the locker room. And fans are starting to pick up on it too. There's been a growing buzz online, with many speculating that this wasn't just a random update, it was a signal, a subtle message about who's separating themselves before the real competition even begins. But if that's true, then this raises a much bigger question. If one quarterback is already standing out this clearly, before camps even fully heat up, then how real is this open competition everyone keeps talking about? Because what Monken just revealed might not have been just an observation. It might have been the first real clue about where this is all heading. And just when people thought that coaches' comments were enough, the signals coming from inside the Browns organization made things even clearer. Because this isn't just one voice anymore. Reports suggest that Andrew Berry has been quietly impressed with Shedeur Sanders, not just for what he does on the field, but for how he approaches everything behind the scenes. The preparation, the consistency, the attention to detail, those are the kinds of things front offices notice long before the public does. And then there's Jimmy Haslam. It's been said that even ownership has taken note of Shedeur's work ethic, which is where this situation starts to feel different. Because when praise reaches that level, it usually means the organization is paying very close attention to one specific player. Now here's the part that makes this even more interesting. None of this has been loud, no official announcement, no headline saying QB1 decided. But when you step back and connect everything, the coach's comments, the front office praise, and the growing buzz around the building, it starts to look less like coincidence and more like a pattern forming in real time. And in the NFL, patterns like this rarely happen by accident. Fans have started to pick up on it too. There's been a lot of discussion online, with some believing this is the Browns slowly setting the stage, not rushing the process, not creating pressure, but quietly building confidence around Shedeur before anything becomes official. At the same time, others are questioning what this means for the rest of the quarterback room. Because if one player is getting this much attention behind the scenes, it naturally raises doubts about how open this competition really is. And that's where things start to feel a little more complicated. Because on the surface, everything still points to a fair battle, but underneath, it's starting to feel like the organization might already know which direction they're leaning. And if that's true, then what comes next might not be about proving who's best. It might just be about confirming what they've already seen. Everyone keeps calling it a quarterback battle, but what if that's not actually what this is? On paper, it sounds like a fair competition. You've got Deshaun Watson, a veteran with a massive contract and years of experience, going up against Shedeur Sanders, the young name generating all the buzz. That alone should create one of the most intense position battles in the league. But when you look a little closer, the situation doesn't feel as balanced as it's being presented. Reports suggest that when it comes to off-season reps, things may not be split evenly from the start, and that's a big deal, because in the NFL, reps are everything. They determine rhythm, confidence, timing with receivers, basically, who actually gets the best chance to prove themselves. And if one quarterback is quietly getting more of those opportunities early on, that's not just a competition. That's an advantage. Now here, where things get even more complicated. Watson's situation isn't just about football. There's a lot tied into him financially and organizationally. The Browns have invested heavily in him, which naturally creates pressure to keep him in that starting role. You don't just move on from a contract like that overnight. But at the same time, performance still matters. And it's being said that the coaching staff is focused on what they're seeing right now, not just past reputation. That opens the door for someone like Shedeur to step in and seriously challenge expectations, especially if he continues to show consistency and leadership behind the scenes. So now you've got two different forces colliding. On one side, you have experience, money, and history. On the other, you have momentum, work ethic, and rising confidence. And when those two things clash, it doesn't always play out the way people expect. Fans are starting to notice this tension too. Some believe the competition is completely open. Others are convinced that the Browns are already leaning in one direction and just haven't made it official yet. Because if this were truly even, wouldn't everything feel a little more balanced? Instead, what we're seeing feels controlled, measured, almost like the team is slowly getting things toward a certain outcome without saying it out loud. And if that's the case, then this QB battle might not be about who wins at all. It might be about when the Browns decide to reveal the decision they've already made. And just when it seemed like the spotlight was locked in on the top two quarterbacks, a quieter situation started raising serious questions. Because while everyone is debating the rise of Shedeur Sanders and the position of Deshaun Watson, there's another name in the room that hasn't been getting the same kind of attention, and that silence might actually be the biggest red flag of all. That name is Dillon Gabriel. Now here, where things get interesting, based on what's been said publicly, Gabriel hasn't been as present at the team facility compared to Shedeur. And while that might not sound like a huge deal at first, in the NFL, that kind of detail matters more than people realize. Showing up, putting in extra reps, being visible to coaches, those are the things that build trust early. And right now, it's being said that one quarterback is clearly doing more of that than the other. To be fair, there could be multiple reasons behind this. Off-season schedules, personal training plans, or even strategic decisions could all play a role. So nothing here is confirmed as a major issue. But when a head coach openly highlights one player's work ethic and doesn't say the same about another, it naturally creates a narrative. And narratives in the NFL spread fast. Fans have already started speculating online. Some believe this could hurt Gabriel's chances before the competition even fully begins. Others think it's being overblown and that once training camp starts, everything resets. But either way, the conversation is happening, and that alone can shift perception. Because in situations like this, perception becomes reality. If coaches start to see one player as more committed, more present, more locked in, that can influence decisions even subconsciously, not just in who gets reps, but in who they trust when things get tough. And that's the part people aren't talking about enough. This isn't just about talent anymore. It's about positioning, momentum, who is building confidence inside the building before the public even sees what's happening on the field. So while the headlines focus on the obvious battle, this quieter situation with Gabriel might end up playing a bigger role than expected. Because sometimes, it's not the loudest story that changes everything. It's the one no one saw coming. And just when people thought the conversation couldn't get any more interesting, something as simple as a jersey number suddenly became a major talking point. It might sound small at first, but in sports, details like this carry way more weight than people realize. When Shedeur Sanders made the switch back to number 2, it wasn't just about aesthetics. That number has been part of his identity for years. It represents his brand, his mindset, what he calls too legendary. So this wasn't just a change, it was a statement. And believe it or not, players around the league actually understand how real that is. LeSean McCoy even spoke on it, explaining how wearing the right number can completely shift your confidence. He shared that early in his career, wearing a number that didn't feel right affected how he played. But the moment he switched back to his signature number, everything changed: his energy, his performance, even his mindset. That's not coincidence, that's psychology. Because in a league where confidence is everything, even the smallest edge can make a difference. And right now, it's being said that Shedeur looks more comfortable, more locked in, and more like himself since making that switch. But here, where it gets deeper. The fact that the Browns allowed that change says something too. Teams don't just hand out numbers without a reason, especially ones tied closely to a player's identity. It suggests a level of respect, maybe even belief, in what that player represents. And fans picked up on it immediately. There's been a lot of buzz online, with people connecting the dots. The work ethic praise, the leadership comments, and now this symbolic shift. It's all starting to feel connected, like each move is part of a bigger picture slowly coming together. Of course, none of this officially confirms anything. A jersey number alone doesn't decide a starting job. But in a situation where every small detail is being analyzed, this doesn't feel random. It feels intentional. And when you combine confidence, identity, and momentum all building at the same time, that's when things start to change fast. Because sometimes, it's not just about how a player performs. It's about when everything starts aligning at once, and what happens next could be the moment it all clicks. And this is where things start to get a little uncomfortable, because not everyone is buying into this narrative. When Tony Grossi reacted to the situation, you could immediately sense the tension. His response didn't come off excited or convinced, it felt skeptical, almost like he wasn't fully on board with what was being suggested about Shedeur Sanders quietly taking over. And that's important. Because insiders like Grossi have been around the organization long enough to read between the lines. When they react a certain way, it usually means there's more going on beneath the surface than what's being said publicly. Now, to be fair, nothing he said outright confirmed any disagreement, but his reaction, his tone, his expression sparked a wave of discussion online. Fans quickly picked up on it, with some believing he's pushing back against the growing hype, while others think he simply doesn't see the same picture the team might be seeing internally. And that's where the divide really begins. On one side, you have the organization seemingly building confidence around Shedeur. On the other, you have members of the media who aren't completely convinced that things are as clear-cut as they appear. It's that classic clash, team vision versus outside perspective. And it doesn't stop there. Fans have completely split into two camps. Some are all in, pointing to the work ethic, the leadership comments, and the steady rise of momentum as proof that something big is happening. Others are holding back, questioning whether this is being overhyped too early, especially with established names still in the room. Because let's be honest, this wouldn't be the first time off-season buzz didn't translate into reality. But at the same time, something about this feels different. The way information is coming out, the way certain details are being emphasized, it's creating just enough uncertainty to keep everyone watching closely. Not a clear answer, not a clear direction, just tension. And tension drives attention. So now, instead of a simple quarterback competition, this has turned into something bigger, a conversation, a debate, a situation where every comment, every reaction, every small detail gets analyzed from every angle. And if the reactions we're seeing right now are any indication, then whatever decision the Browns eventually make, it's not going to come quietly. And when you step back and connect everything that's happened so far, it starts to feel less like a competition and more like a quiet takeover happening right in front of us. Think about it. You've got Shedeur Sanders being consistently praised for his work ethic, not just once, but repeatedly. Coaches highlighting how often he's in the building, leadership being brought up without anyone even asking. Those aren't random compliments. In the NFL, that's how foundations get built early. Then you look at the structure of the reps. It's being said that off-season opportunities won't be evenly split at the start. And if that's true, that's a huge signal. Because whoever gets more reps early usually builds momentum faster, better timing, more confidence, stronger chemistry with teammates. And once that gap forms, it's hard to close. Now add in the organizational backing. Reports suggest names like Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam have already taken notice of Shedeur's approach. Again, nothing officially declared, but enough to show where attention is being directed. And that's where this starts to feel intentional. Because if this were truly wide open, you wouldn't see such a clear pattern forming this early. You wouldn't hear one name consistently tied to effort, leadership, and growth, while others are barely mentioned in the same way. But that's exactly what's happening. Now, to be fair, none of this confirms anything. No official QB1 announcement, no final decision has been made, at least not publicly. And in the NFL, things can change fast. One strong camp performance, one preseason game, and the entire narrative can flip overnight. But right now, the momentum feels one-sided. Fans are starting to recognize it too. There's a growing belief that the Browns may already know what direction they're leaning. They're just letting it play out naturally instead of forcing the conversation too early. And honestly, that would make sense. Because if Shedeur continues on this path, continues building trust inside the building, continues showing leadership without needing to say much, then by the time the official decision comes, it won't feel like a surprise at all. It'll feel expected. And that's what makes this so interesting. Because what we might be watching right now isn't a battle unfolding. It's a transition already in motion, one that's being revealed piece by piece, long before anyone officially says it out loud. So after everything we've just seen, all the comments, all the subtle signals, all the quiet moments that most people overlooked, it really comes down to one question. Did the Browns already make their decision? Because when you line it all up, it's hard to ignore the direction things are moving. Shedeur Sanders has been the one consistently linked to effort, leadership, and presence inside the building. Not just once, not just by one person, but across multiple voices within the organization. And in the NFL, that kind of alignment doesn't just happen randomly. At the same time, you still have Deshaun Watson in the picture, a player with experience, expectations, and a situation that can't simply be ignored. That alone keeps this from being officially decided, at least on the surface. But here, where it gets interesting. Sometimes teams don't announce a change, they ease into it. They let the narrative build naturally. They allow one player to gain momentum, confidence, and trust, so that when the moment finally comes, it doesn't feel sudden. It feels earned, expected. And that's exactly what this situation is starting to look like. Of course, none of this is confirmed. There's still time. Training camp, preseason, real game pressure, those are the moments that truly define who takes control. And all it takes is one shift, one standout performance, for everything to flip in an instant. But right now, it feels like we're watching something unfold in real time. Not a loud decision, not a headline move, just a steady, quiet shift happening behind the scenes, one that's becoming more obvious with every passing day. And if that continues, then the real question isn't who will be QB1. It's whether the Browns have already chosen, and we're just waiting for the rest of the world to catch up.